Get away from my son, you psycho bitch! I screamed at the top of my lungs, placing myself between Candace and Caleb. Her eyes were wide and crazed, hands outstretched as if to snatch him away from me. Caleb clung to my leg, whimpering in fear. "Mommy, I don't want to go with the mean lady." Candace's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "He's my nephew. I'll take him whenever I want." Her diamond-encrusted fingers closed into fists. This wasn't the first time my sister-in-law had tried to force her way into my life and make decisions about my child, but her behavior was becoming more unhinged by the day. "You're delusional, Candace. Caleb is terrified of you." I pulled my son closer, glaring at the woman I once naively considered family. Candace opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of a car door slamming outside cut her off. "Candace, what's going on?" My brother Marcus's voice preceded him through the front door. "Oh, Marcus, thank God you're here!" Candace instantly transformed into the picture of a devoted wife. "Your insane sister is keeping my nephew from me again." I wanted to scream at the blatant lie, but Marcus turned his stern gaze on me before I could speak. "Really, Raina? Candace has every right to see Caleb. She barged in here ranting like a lunatic." I shot back, unwilling to back down. "Ask Caleb what she did." "Don't," Candace scoffed loudly. "Please, we both know that boy will just repeat whatever lies his trashy mother tells him." The venom in her voice shouldn't have surprised me, yet the insult still felt like a slap across the face. Candace had been looking down on me and my lower-class existence for years. Marcus sighed heavily. "We're not doing this again, you two. Candace, let's go home." "But Marcus," she began to protest. "Now," he stated with finality, shooting me a disapproving glare before leading his wife out. As the door slammed behind them, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. Caleb was still trembling against me. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, smoothing his hair. "The mean lady is gone now. For today, at least." But deep down, I knew this war with Candace was just beginning. The next morning, I tried to shake off the previous day's events as I got Caleb ready for school. He was uncharacteristically quiet, his usual endless stream of chatter replaced by nervous glances towards the front door. "You don't need to worry, sweetie," I assured him, packing his Spider-Man lunchbox. "Candace isn't allowed to take you from me." Caleb nodded slowly, but his brow remained furrowed. At 6 years old, he'd already experienced too much of his aunt's volatility. My thoughts drifted to my older brother Marcus as I drove Caleb to elementary school. How could he continue enabling Candace's increasingly disturbing behavior? Then again, he'd always been blind to her faults. I remembered when they first started dating in college. Even then, Candace's obsession with status and wealth was on full display. She'd relentlessly mock my second-hand wardrobe, her perfectly plucked eyebrows raised in judgmental disdain. "You'd look so much prettier if you put in a little effort, Raina," she'd sneer with a cruel smirk. "Marcus deserves a real woman, not some dowdy charity case." I grit my teeth, gripping the steering wheel tighter. All these years later, and her elitist taunts still stung. Candace came from an obscenely rich family, born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She took perverse pleasure in reminding me that I'd never be in her social stratosphere. After graduation, Marcus landed a high-paying corporate job, and Candace wasted no time locking him down in marriage. I'd never seen two people more mismatched joined together in supposed holy matrimony. Marcus was so blinded by Candace's looks and the lure of her family's money that he ignored all the red flags: her explosive temper, irrational jealousy, and unsettling mood swings. I tried warning him, but he brushed it off as bridal stress. Shaking my head, I pulled into the school drop-off loop and gave Caleb a reassuring hug. "Have a great day, okay? Don't let mean Aunt Candace ruin it for you." He nodded again, forcing a small smile before heading inside. My heart ached for him. Caleb was such a sweet, gentle boy. He didn't deserve to be subjected to Candace's toxic behavior. As I drove home, my mind raced with memories of the countless times Candace had belittled and mocked me over the years. Her cruelty only intensified after Caleb was born, as if she couldn't stand sharing Marcus's attention and affection. I pulled into my driveway, gripping the steering wheel as flashes of yesterday's confrontation replayed in my mind. The way Candace's eyes had bulged with deranged entitlement as she tried to take my son. Her venomous insults about me being trashy. Something had to be done about her accelerating mental instability before she did real harm. I was tired of being her emotional punching bag. If Marcus refused to see the truth about his wife, I'd make him open his eyes, one way or another. That evening, my parents came over for their weekly family dinner. As I set the table, I could hear Caleb chattering away in the living room, no doubt regaling them with tales from first grade. "Raina, is everything okay, honey?" my mom asked with a concerned frown as she entered the kitchen. "Caleb mentioned something about Candace showing up yesterday." I sighed heavily, recounting the unhinged confrontation to my horrified parents. Dad's brow furrowed deeper with each detail. "That woman is completely unstable," he finally said, shaking his head. "I've been telling Marcus for years that she needs professional help." "Well, he's made it quite clear he doesn't want to hear it," I replied bitterly. "He's so obsessed with maintaining their perfect life that he refuses to see Candace for who she really is." Mom reached out and gave my arm a comforting squeeze. "You can't reason with delusional people, sweetheart. All you can do is protect yourself and Caleb." I managed a tight smile, deeply grateful for their unconditional support. At least my family could see Candace's toxicity for what it was. An hour later, we were all seated around the dining table, enjoying the meal I'd prepared. Caleb's endless chatter filled the room, putting me at ease as it always did. That is, until the doorbell rang. I immediately tensed, a knot forming in my stomach. "Please, not here, not now." "I'll get it," Dad offered gruffly, kissing the top of Mom's head before heading to the front door. Seconds later, the unmistakable sound of Candace's shrill voice reached my ears. "Well, if it isn't the low-class family reunion," she crowed with a derisive laugh as she pushed past Dad into the dining room. My blood immediately began to boil at the insult directed at my parents. Candace, however, seemed utterly unfazed by her rude behavior as usual. "What an absolute dump you live in, Raina," she continued, wrinkling her surgically enhanced nose as she surveyed my modest home. "I guess beggars can't be choosers, though. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here after yesterday." I managed through gritted teeth. Candace simply rolled her eyes. "Please don't act so victimized. I'm here to spend quality time with my nephew, like any good aunt would want." "Over my dead body," I shot back vehemently. In the blink of an eye, Candace's demeanor shifted. Her icy glare landed directly on Caleb, who shrank back in his chair. "Well, well, if it isn't the little liar himself," she hissed, taking a menacing step towards him. That was the final straw. "Get out of my house!" I yelled, placing myself between her and my petrified son. "This isn't over, Raina," Candace snarled as Dad ushered her towards the door. "Not by a long shot." The venom in her parting words sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I knew this conflict had escalated to a dangerous new level. There would be no more neutrality. It was us or her. A few weeks later, the annual Baxter family birthday bash for Marcus rolled around. Despite my parents' protests, I decided to attend, if only to keep an eye on Candace's unhinged behavior around Caleb. The party was held at Marcus and Candace's ostentatious mansion, because of course it was. As I pulled up to the circular driveway lined with impeccably trimmed hedges, I felt grossly underdressed in my modest sundress and flats. The other guests' designer labels and dripping jewels made me self-conscious. "Just ignore them, sweetie," I told Caleb as I walked him inside, already bracing myself for Candace's inevitable insults about my appearance. Sure enough, as soon as we entered the lavishly decorated living room, her shrill voice cut through the crowd. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Cinderella herself." A trill of mocking laughter followed from the cluster of identically coiffed women surrounding her, all clutching boutique shopping bags. I felt my cheeks flush as their judging eyes raked over my simple outfit. "Nice of you to take a break from scrubbing floors, Raina," Candace continued, sauntering over with a wicked grin. "I almost didn't recognize you without your rags on." Swallowing hard, I fought the urge to hurl my drink in her smug face. I couldn't let her get a rise out of me, not in front of all these strangers. Caleb clutched my hand tighter, sensing the tension. "Happy birthday, Marcus," I forced myself to say as my brother approached, hoping he'd run interference before things escalated. "Thanks for coming," he replied stiffly. With a resigned sigh, he turned to Candace. "Do you have to start with her already? It's supposed to be my day." "Oh, I'm just having a bit of harmless fun." Candace responded with a dismissive hair toss. Raina knows I'm joking, don't you, sis? The venom in her syrupy tone made my skin crawl. I opened my mouth to protest, but Marcus cut me off. You know how Candace gets. Just ignore her. He pulled me into an awkward side hug, his eyes pleading for me not to make a scene. Grinding my molars, I managed a terse nod. I'd been putting up with Candace's jokes for over a decade. What was one more night of torture for Marcus's sake? As the party stretched on, Candace's digs grew increasingly more pointed and more audible. She'd pause meaningfully whenever I walked past, her cronies stifling snickers behind monogrammed clutches. Finally, it was time for Marcus to open gifts. Candace, of course, had to make a grand spectacle of her lavish present. Here you are, birthday boy, she trilled, placing a small box wrapped in shimmering paper into his hands. I can't wait to see your face. Marcus obliged, tearing off the wrapping to reveal a sleek designer watch, likely worth more than my entire yearly salary. It's beautiful, babe, he murmured, pulling Candace in for a kiss as their sycophantic audience cooed. I felt a pang in my chest as I watched them, wondering if I'd ever find someone who could love me like that. My gaze drifted down to the modest little gift bag in my hands, filled with a few inexpensive golf accessories I knew Marcus would appreciate. Well, Raina? Candace's shrill voice shattered my thoughts. Don't you have something for the birthday boy, too? All eyes turned towards me. Feeling my cheeks burn, I hesitantly stepped forward and handed Marcus the gift bag, mumbling a quiet, "Happy birthday." Wow, how generous, Candace snarked loudly as he pulled out the mundane golf balls and tees. I'm sure he'll just cherish that dollar store junk forever. The room's judgmental silence was deafening. Tears of humiliation stung my eyes as I avoided Marcus's pitying gaze, wishing I could simply melt into the floor. Clutching Caleb's hand, I turned and fled from the room, Candace's jeering laughter echoing in my ears. As I reached the front door, one thought crystallized in my mind with cold, hard clarity. This had gone on for far too long. It was time to make that wretched woman pay. The humiliation from Marcus's birthday party hung over me like a dark cloud for days afterward. I couldn't shake the memory of Candace's mocking laughter, the disdainful glances from her vapid socialite friends. I knew I should have been used to her cruelty by now. But having my modest gift so publicly ridiculed in front of my own brother stung more than I cared to admit. As I dropped Caleb off at school one morning, I found myself gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That smug, heartless woman had gone too far this time. Something had to be done. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the passenger door opening. I turned to see my mom climbing into the car, a look of grim determination on her face. Good, you're still here, she said without preamble. We need to talk about Candace. I felt myself tense instinctively at the mention of her name. What about her? Raina, this has gone on for far too long, Mom stated, her tone broking no argument. The way she treated you at Marcus's party was the final straw for me. Swallowing hard, I slowly nodded in agreement. I know. Believe me, I know. That woman is unhinged, Mom continued, her voice lowering to a fierce whisper. Her behavior isn't normal, sweetie. It's becoming dangerous. My chest tightened as disturbing images of Candace's crazed eyes flashed through my mind from our last confrontation. You're right. I'm just so afraid of what she's capable of, especially around Caleb. Mom reached over and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. Which is why we can't just sit back and let her keep terrorizing this family. It's time we take a stand. Her determined words ignited something inside me, a spark of righteous indignation I hadn't felt in years. She was absolutely right. I'd been a passive victim of Candace's abuse for far too long, all in the name of keeping the peace with Marcus. But after her deplorable display at the party, something inside me had shifted. The gloves were finally coming off. You're right, Mom, I said, feeling a surge of courage course through me. I'm done being Candace's personal punching bag. It's time to fight back. A small smile played across Mom's lips. Sup, and I could have sworn I detected a hint of pride in her eyes. That's my girl. So, what's the plan? As I began mapping out my first steps towards revenge, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. No more cowering in fear, no more turning the other cheek. This was war, and I didn't intend to lose. Well, for starters, we need to open Marcus's eyes to who Candace really is, I declared, my voice steadier than it had been in years. He's been blindly defending her for too long. Mom arched an eyebrow. You know your brother better than anyone. What will it take for him to finally see the truth? A muscle twitched in my jaw as I considered her question. I knew exposing Candace's mental instability to Marcus would be an uphill battle. But this time, I was ready to fight with everything I had. Don't worry, I stated with finality. I have a few ideas to make him wake up and smell the venom. Candace wants a war? A hard smile crossed my lips. She's about to get one. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake with a start. My heart pounded as I sat upright in bed, straining to hear any other noise over the thundering of blood in my ears. Then, a piercing scream shattered the eerie silence. "Caleb!" I gasped, cold dread seizing my body as I recognized my son's terrified cry. Throwing off the covers, I raced down the hallway towards his bedroom, half blinded by panic. As I threw open the door, a chilling sight stopped me dead in my tracks. Caleb cowered in the corner, his little body trembling uncontrollably as shards of broken glass and splintered wood littered the floor around him. The window had been completely shattered, tiny razor-sharp shards glittering in the moonlight like deadly confetti. Mommy," he whimpered between ragged sobs, eyes wide with fear. In that moment, I didn't think I'd ever seen him look so small and vulnerable. "It's okay, baby. I'm here," I managed to force out, my voice shaking as I scooped him up protectively in my arms. He clung to me like a lifeline, his tears soaking through my nightshirt. Rocking him gently, I scanned the wreckage of his room with mounting horror. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. It was a targeted attack. But by who? And why would anyone want to hurt my sweet little boy? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, driving the air from my lungs. There was only one person unhinged enough to do something this twisted: Candace. As the weight of her depravity sank in, a cold fury began replacing the fear coursing through my veins. That sadistic bitch had gone way too far this time. Putting her jealous hands on me was one thing, but threatening the life of my child? That was unforgivable, unthinkable, inexcusable. "Shh, it's going to be okay," I whispered fiercely into Caleb's hair, hugging him even tighter. I would get to the bottom of this, and make damn sure Candace paid for whatever she'd done, even if it was the last thing I ever did. The next few hours passed by in a blur of police questioning and cleaning up the shattered glass. I must have recounted the same details a dozen times, desperately trying to piece together any clues that could implicate Candace. Marcus showed up at some point, his usual slicked-back hair disheveled as he embraced us both. "Thank God you two are all right," he murmured shakily. "Who would do something like this?" I opened my mouth, ready to unleash all my pent-up rage and suspicion about his twisted wife, but the words never came. One look at Caleb's red-rimmed eyes and trembling lips, and I knew I couldn't put him through that emotional trauma again. Not tonight. So instead, I forced a tight smile and lied through my teeth. "I have no idea. Some punk kid's playing a sick prank, I guess." Marcus sighed heavily, scrubbing a hand down his face. "Jesus, what is this world coming to?" He pulled us both in for a fierce hug, oblivious to the fact that the real monster was much closer than he realized. As his strong arms enveloped us, I caught a whiff of Candace's sickly sweet perfume lingering on his shirt. A chilling reminder that I was anything but safe, even within this embrace. Meeting my son's haunted gaze over Marcus's shoulder, a hard knot of determination formed in the pit of my stomach. Whoever was responsible for this attack was going to pay dearly. If it really was Candace behind this twisted act, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because I wasn't just going to expose her malicious lies to Marcus, I was going to utterly destroy her. In the weeks following the attack on Caleb's room, I became a woman possessed. Every waking moment was consumed by the burning desire to make Candace pay for what she'd done. I knew in my bones she was behind it, even if I didn't have concrete proof yet. The smashed window, the threatening message it sent, it reeked of her pathological mind games and escalating instability. She was unraveling and lashing out in increasingly dangerous ways. But this time, I was ready. I'd been pushed to my limit one too many times by that sadistic woman. No more turning the other cheek, no more playing the victim. It was time to fight fire with fire. I started documenting every vindictive slight, every backhanded insult Candace had ever hurled my way over the years. Scouring my emails, texts, even old social media posts, I meticulously compiled evidence of her toxic behavior and disturbing obsession with me, a paper trail that revealed a clear pattern of derangement. I also began carefully cataloging any eyewitness accounts from friends and family who'd been subjected to her outbursts and mood swings. My parents were able to recount dozens of incidents, as were some of Marcus's more clear-eyed coworkers. With each new data point I uncovered, a damning portrait began to take shape, one of a deeply troubled woman whose envy towards me had mutated into a full-blown mental disorder. Someone for whom no attack was off limits in order to satiate her twisted need for vengeance. Someone who, if left unchecked, could easily snap again and place Caleb's life in danger. That thought alone was enough to fuel my crusade, no matter how underhanded or invasive my tactics became. I started documenting Candace's daily routines, combing her social media for any clues about her deteriorating state of mind. I even went as far as staking out her weekly Pilates class, determined to catch her in the act of an unhinged outburst. I knew Marcus would never believe any of it without proof, hard evidence that he couldn't simply dismiss or rationalize away. His loyalty to his wife was that strong, that blind. But I was going to shatter that delusion once and for all, no matter how much it devastated him. Because in the end, exposing Candace's true nature was the only way I could ensure Caleb's safety. She'd taken her twisted games too far, and I was the only one willing to stop her reign of terror. As I pored over the incriminating materials late one night, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I had her. I finally, truly had her. The paper trail didn't lie. It showed a clear, undeniable pattern of mental illness that even Marcus couldn't ignore. Leaning back in my chair, I couldn't resist the hard smile that crept across my face. Candace had been drunk on her wealth and privilege for far too long, blind to consequences. She'd alienated and attacked everyone around her in her downward spiral, leaving behind a wake of destruction. Well, now it was time to reap what she'd sown. The old saying about karma was true. It really was a bitch, and Candace was about to feel its full wrath. I just hoped Marcus could find it in himself to forgive me when this was all over. Taking down his deranged wife would devastate him, but it was a necessary evil to protect my son. My family. No matter how much collateral damage it caused, I knew one thing for certain. Candace's world was about to come crashing down around her, and I was going to be the one swinging the wrecking ball. It was the night of Candace's weekly book club meeting at her mansion. The perfect opportunity to catch her alone and finally unleash the bombshell I'd been meticulously assembling for weeks. As I pulled up to the imposing iron gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for, when I could shatter her delusional world once and for all. Clutching the bulging manila envelope filled with documented proof of her mental illness, I took a steadying breath before ringing the call box. Seconds later, Candace's saccharine voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes? Who is it?" "It's me," I replied flatly. "We need to talk." There was a pregnant pause before the gate swung open with a metallic groan. I could practically hear the sneer in her tone as she responded. Well, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Gripping the envelope tightly, I steeled myself and strode up the long, winding driveway towards the looming house. Candace was already waiting in the doorway, arms crossed and chin raised in a silent challenge as I approached. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Raina," she said coldly as I mounted the front steps. "After that despicable stunt you pulled with Marcus last week?" "Can it, Candace?" I cut her off, taking a small vindictive pleasure in her look of shock. "We both know why I'm really here." Her icy glare narrowed suspiciously. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Wordlessly, I thrust the overstuffed envelope into her hands, my jaw clenched tightly. "See for yourself." Keeping one wary eye trained on me, Candace flipped open the envelope and began rifling through the stack of documents and photos inside. I watched in tense silence as her perfectly arched eyebrows slowly knit together, lips pursing tighter and tighter with each damning page. "What is this?" she finally hissed, whipping her venomous glare back up to me. "Some pathetic attempt at blackmail?" I shook my head, feeling a grim smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "Not blackmail, Candace. The truth." Her eyes widened fractionally as she seemed to realize the full implications of what she was looking at. I could see the panic starting to set in as the evidence mounted, a clear, undeniable pattern of unhinged behavior, obsessive jealousy, and severe mental issues. "You deranged little bitch," she spat, cheeks flushing crimson with rage as she hurled the papers at my feet. "You think this proves anything? Marcus would never believe your insane lies." "Oh, I don't think he'll need much convincing once he sees all this," I countered coolly, gesturing to the scattered documents. "Not after the little message you sent Caleb a few weeks ago." Her face drained of color at my pointed reference to the night she'd shattered my son's bedroom window. For a brief moment she seemed to teeter on the edge of losing her carefully constructed composure entirely. But just as quickly, her mask of indignant fury slammed back into place. "You have no proof," she snarled, taking a menacing step towards me. "This is all just sad, pathetic conjecture on your part, a desperate ploy for attention, as always." I held my ground, locking eyes with her as I delivered my parting words with cold finality. "That's what you think, Candace. But pretty soon Marcus is going to see the truth. He's going to see what a deranged, twisted shell of a human being he married." I paused, letting the weight of my promise sink in. "And when he does, your precious life of wealth and privilege is going to come crumbling down around you." Her face contorted in a mask of pure unrestrained hatred. "You'll regret this, Raina," she seethed through gritted teeth. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Turning on my heel, I left her seething on the doorstep and headed back towards my car, each step lighter than the last. I knew there would be hell to pay for my actions in the coming days, but I didn't care. The wheels were finally in motion. Candace's downfall was inevitable, and nothing would stop me from watching her world burn.